Welcome to the Intentionists podcast, where we explore the interplay between intuition, spiritual health, and everything in between. I'm your host, Aimee Schreiber.
And I'm Hilary Zwallen. Our intention is to create a dialogue that inspires you to consciously forge your path with curiosity and compassion for life and its mysteries. So, Aimee, today we're talking to you.
Yes.
About shedding skin and your thoughts on minimalism in Mexico. You are now landed in Valencia, Spain, right?
Correct.
And it's probably too soon to dive into all the processing that's going on there. But I thought it would be really fun for our listeners to hear your story of moving to Mexico, living there. Were you there for almost a year?
Yeah, we were there for a full year, a little over a year.
A little over a year, and all that goes into that. So why don't we just dive in with you talking to our listeners about your original reason for moving to Mexico?
Well, the plan was kind of hatched about 6 months before we left. So we were living in Washington, and we were in the midst of looking for a house to buy. And moving out of the country was something we kind of always talked about, but it just didn't really seem to make sense. But Danny brought it up again while we were looking for a house and we couldn't find anything. And I was like, yes, like it just totally clicked. And I thought, yeah, this is the perfect time. We really wanted to go somewhere where we could learn Spanish. So we were kind of looking around different areas and we eventually decided Mexico. So this whole little like initial planning, it was about 6 months from the time we said, yes, let's do this to the time that we left. And I bring up my initial like immediate enthusiasm about it because I think that the entire process of moving to a different country, especially with a child, is so involved that it requires a certain amount of conviction in the beginning and dedication for you to be able to like push through the obstacles when they arrive, not if they arrive. I think that if we had both not been like, yes, this is definitely something we are on board with, it could have been a horrible experience. But yeah, that conviction was really important to the process. And I think with any big decision, really. So yeah, originally we wanted to experience a new, different culture than we had. We wanted to get away from the lifestyle that we were living, which I mean was a great lifestyle, but it was like standard American. We had cars. You drive from your house to the grocery store, and we wanted to get rid of our cars and be able to walk. And then that with the language. So yeah, that's how it started.
So moving from suburban to maybe more urban situation where you can be in a village where you can, urban, depending on the definition of urban, but in a place where you can walk to the grocery store, walk to the restaurants and live it, which is really not common unless you're in a very urban areas in the United States. Most people drive and park and have to deal with that.
Yeah, that was an interesting experience, just like the walking. I love that part of it because it just was so much healthier. I felt like, oh, I don't have to be all stressed about, I got to go work out for an hour today because I've been sitting at my computer. It's like, no, I will just walk 5 miles to the restaurant,
Yeah. I feel like it's a great lifestyle when you really do walk places. It's like we're designed for that, right? We're designed to walk long distances. Now, talk to me about, you have a bunch of stuff. You're living in Washington. What's the process like of getting rid of things, and how much did you get rid of?
We got rid of everything basically in our 4-bedroom house, including our cars, except for we brought about 2 suitcases each. And then we have like a box of random stuff at my mom's. So that was a super interesting process because I got to see what objects I had wrapped up my identity with, and those were the things that were hardest to get rid of.
Like what?
Like for me, as someone who likes to make art and likes to create things, likes to make my little pillows and decorate my house with this ottoman that I found and then painted and sewed a cover for, like all this stuff. I realized that I had so much of my self-worth based on what artistic creations I had made And then all the time spent acquiring the supplies, the sewing machines, the fabrics, the paints, the canvases,
It's expensive.
the beads. I had all these supplies, which I love, and I love to do that stuff. But I got to see, like, I didn't want all that stuff just wasting away in a storage unit for an unspecified amount of time. So it was pretty rewarding to like meet people. Like, I just kind of had an ongoing estate sale for a couple months. And people would come in and I got to meet the person like, oh, you're going to have my sewing machine. And this lady came and she's like, oh, I'm going to make these little bear costumes, I think she said. But she was all excited about this business she was going to do with my sewing machine. So I was like, oh, that's cool. Like, it's going to a good home,
I love that.
It was so it was cool. And it was cool to get rid of things that like I didn't want, because a lot of stuff in my house, it was like random stuff from my first wedding reception. So it's like, yeah, that stuff, best to unload that old energy.
So I see it like two things, right? You've got kind of the unloading and of the decluttering, but then this idea of paying it forward with your treasures. I think of you as an artist. When I think of you, I'm like, you're just like creative in every way and super smart. And I can see how art supplies, A, they're super expensive. B, it's part of who you are, right? And that really is, I've never heard you explain it that way. Being able to be like, I'm helping this person by giving them this sewing machine or whatever it is, and they're going to go create all of, like, talk about abundance, right? Now they're going to go create all this stuff without you, like you're saying, just sitting in a storage unit and
I hope so.
Collecting dust.
Yeah, I tried to make it into like a positive experience for myself, especially because it took a huge amount of time to like post all these things. And like, we ended up giving a lot away in the end because we just ran out of time. But the other weird thing that I confronted was getting rid of my snowboarding stuff. I had a bunch of snowboarding stuff and all my gear for that, but I haven't been snowboarding in like, I don't know, like 5 years now. But it's something I used to do all the time. And it was kind of like in my mind became this symbol of my youth and my balance and my athleticism and my adventuresomeness. So it's like, oh, I am Aimee, the adventurous one, because I snowboard, or I could if I so chose to, because I have a snowboard in my garage, So
I love that you're putting it like this, because you're like, yes, doesn't it just, it's almost laughable, the stuff that we...
It is. It's so silly.
That we identify with, like, that our identity is just totally wrapped up in. I have a bag. I literally have a bag of old dance shoes that are disgusting, like so gross. I mean, they're now like 15 years old. They stink. But they're like my shoes from when I was professional, and some of them have rhinestones on them and all that. And I think I have them in this disgusting little bag in my closet. And I'm like, I just can't let them go, because I'm like, that is the last remnant of my dancing life. Like,
yeah.
And I'm like, we just need to toss them in the garbage. Like, when am I going to use those again? And if I am, I can go buy a new pair of shoes if I need to. Like, anyway, for me, it's a total identity connection. So it's interesting you put it that way, that snowboarding was that connection to your youth, and maybe that's not bad to hang on to that stuff, but it's like, if I guess if the goal is to practice detachment, then it's a lot more helpful to just let it go.
Right. Well, for us, we knew that we wanted to have a completely new experience of living. And to do that, we would have to make major, major room, not only by lightening our load physically, getting rid of stuff, but like lightening the mental clutter around all our stuff as well. Because you need that energy to put towards the new lifestyle. It requires space, like a lot of space. So yeah, we felt it was just like made most sense to try to get rid of it all. The other funny thing, the only thing that I cried about when I saw it go was this plant that I had. I didn't realize how attached I'd become to this sweet little snake plant. It had grown really big, and I had it for maybe 2 years at that point. And I had just barely told my neighbors that we were going to be leaving and getting rid of stuff. So come pick whatever you want. And the first day, this lady came over, one of my neighbors, and she saw the plant and she was like, can I buy this from you? And I was like, oh, sure, I guess. Like, I hadn't detached from it yet. I hadn't said goodbye. So she took it, and she saw that I was really sad. She's like, don't worry, I have so many plants. It's going to a really great home. So that made me feel good that she said that. But I was so surprised, like how sad I was. Like, it was like a little family member.
Well, it's interesting too that the idea that like the process can creep up on you, that you start with the
Mm-hmm.
intention of like, we're going to make a radical change in our life and we're going to move to a foreign country. And then all these little triggers pop up that are really unexpected, like selling the snake plant or the snowboard. And we can giggle about it, but it's like, this is real stuff. This is what people really deal with when they're stuck
Mm-hmm.
trying to make a radical shift, right? I think that it's a lot of times it's our associations to our things that can be a big
Mm-hmm.
part of holding us back.
Exactly. Well, yeah, it's always it's an easy justification to make when you say, "Oh, I really want to do this thing, but I have a house. Oh, but I have this thing, I have that thing, and they're big things, That's why it becomes so important to decide what you really, really want to do and how you
It
want to live.
requires you, like you were saying, to ask the question over and over. It's like the universe continues to present you with like, are you sure? Are you sure? Like as you're giving
Right.
away your sewing machine
Right.
and your beloved snowboarding equipment and the your art supplies and all these things. It's a way for you to continually reiterate your intention for what you're really
Exactly.
committed to through the process. That's really cool to see that. So what was your experience for people who may be thinking about making a drastic change in their lifestyle, or whether it be simplifying, or maybe it's that they want to, buy a home and get and settle down, like depending on where you're at. No judgment either way. What was the response from people? Like what were the projections you received from people when you said, we're going to Mexico?
It was overall really enthusiastic and people were really supportive in general. The most common response was, "Oh, wow, that's so awesome. Like, congratulations. It's like you're doing it. That's what we all want to do and you're actually doing it." So that was the most common one. But from family members, there was definite like, "Oh, are you sure it's safe? Like, I hope you guys are safe there." Because they read things and like their fears, are not totally unfounded. Like we did have someone break into our apartment when we were there and learned about all sorts of things while we were there regarding like safety differences place to place in Mexico. But yeah, in general, people were really, really supportive. I did have one neighbor who was very concerned. He was a sweet older gentleman who I would talk to when he got his mail, and I would pick up Lincoln from the bus stop. But he was very upset with us. He was probably the most negative response we got.
Why was he so upset? What was that about?
I mean, he just said it's so dangerous there. Like you're putting your lives in danger. Yeah, he was not happy with us.
So now you arrive in Mexico, and what was your reality, right? Because obviously as you prepare for a trip or a journey or a big shift, there's obviously this idea in our minds of like how it's going to be and how great it's going to be and all the things that we project into what the experience could be. There's always the anticipation of what could go wrong. So now that you've arrived now you're in Mexico, what are your thoughts? Where does it fall short? Where does it exceed your expectations?
Well, yeah, you on the way there, the whole time while you're preparing, you have the vision of yourself on the tropical beach, that's like the end point. But when we actually arrived there, it was the middle of the summer. So we went in June. Me and Danny actually did a little yoga retreat and then went back to pick up Lincoln and came back again in August. But that is the height of the humid rainy season. So we were immediately hit with heat that we have never experienced before, which took a little getting used to. I mean, like you just really had to take like 4 cold showers a day and then it was fine. It was the sweating was all kind of cleansing feeling. Like at least that's what I told myself. Like, oh, my whole body is detoxing in every moment, while you're dripping. But probably the people were so nice. Like I was hoping that they would be, and I know like based on the people I know who are from Mexico, the culture is just very warm. And we were not disappointed. Like we were so warmly received. Especially, as foreigners not knowing the language, like we were definitely trying, and our goal in doing this was to learn Spanish. So we immediately started Spanish school. But yeah, I was blown away by how open and how warm people were. Like perfect strangers. You just met them and suddenly they're asking you to be their grandchild's godparents. It's like,
Yeah.
it was just like it was very nice to go from feeling kind of isolated in our lives in Washington. Like, I didn't really have very many friends there. And I was like, I wanted a sense of community, and we really got a sense of community immediately. I mean, not immediately. It took some time to like meet people and make friends, but that is one thing that I found there that was made a big difference in my experience there.
It's so interesting because I think that for so many of us in, middle class America, we are living relatively isolated lives, and partially because we can keep up with our friends on social media. So there's not really a reason to have a lot of FaceTime with people, like literal FaceTime, not Apple FaceTime, but
right.
right. I mean, like, you really have to make an effort. And I find in different cultures and the way things are set up, like just walking, I've been to Europe a lot in the recent months. And even though when we were in Italy, I wasn't talking to a lot of people because I don't speak Italian. I feel like I was making eye contact with people on the street and smiling, and you're just engaging with humanity in a way that you don't when you're driving in a car and when you're on your phone all the time, which I'm guilty of both. And part of it is just the way our lives are set up. And I'm sure that's maybe different in different parts of America, but certainly I hear this general hum of discontent among people in my similar life point and experience and socioeconomic background and all of that.
Right. Well, it's easy to stay relatively isolated when you're so busy. Everyone's so busy. I found that part of the Mexican culture is to take the time, to like slow down and enjoy walking down the street and talking to the neighbors. Like, you may have somewhere to go, but that's not going to prevent you from standing and chatting with someone for 20 minutes. Like, people aren't so concerned with rushing from here to there, which was very, very refreshing. And like at the grocery store, you're in line at the grocery store. The person in front is like having a 15-minute conversation with the cashier. When that first happened, I'm like looking around like, dude, everyone's going to start getting angry. This is a long line and they're just chatting about nothing up there. But everyone's like just totally fine and like enjoying the moment, and no one's worried about taking things slow. Like, it's not the mad race.
I feel like that's partially living next to a body of large water like the sea or the ocean, right?
Yes.
It just calms you down. So what was the most confronting thing about arriving in Mexico for you?
For me, it was, this isn't really something that I considered very closely in my mind before we left, but traveling around is something that has always been inherently stressful for me because I have pretty serious irritable bowel syndrome, which is triggered physically by delicious food of all kinds, including typical Mexican food, and triggered emotionally by wandering around new places. Like, right. So that to be constantly confronted with changing my mind and pushing my boundaries on how much uncertainty and discomfort I'm willing to deal with, that was no small thing for me. Confronting feelings of being out of control of my environment, and at some unfortunate times of my actual physical body, like being out of control of how I'm getting around. Like, I'm not sitting in my own car and I could stop whenever I want if I have to, like, to use public transportation and walk everywhere. It was just like I was confronted with this new form of anxiety around it. It was a lot of energy expenditure to combat that anxiety in my mind every time I stepped in an Uber or got on the bus. And it sounds really crazy to say, like hearing it out loud, but it was quite enlightening to see how before I had previously kind of arranged my whole life to kind of cater to this underlying fear of being stranded in an awkward social situation and not have access to a bathroom, and therefore be rejected from everyone and ostracized and left to die alone in the wilderness. That's like this weird underlying fear that was there. And
What was that like? I mean, what was it like experiencing just the fear, and B, the epiphany of how much it's really running your life? At what point did you realize it was just controlling basically all aspects, as I can imagine? I mean, that sounds, as you're explaining it, I'm having so much empathy, and like, I can't imagine what that would have been like for you. That sounds so hard.
I mean, like realizing that it's a challenge for a lot of people while traveling, especially during rainy months, like people are having stomach bugs all the time because there's just more bacteria around when it's so hot and humid in the food. So like the camaraderie of fellow travelers that helped be like, okay, this is like not that big of a deal. Like people around here are used to someone frantically rushing in and asking for a bathroom if that so happened, you know? But the other thing, I tried to get really creative in my mind, like in addressing the anxiety. And my most recent strategy is that when I hop on the bus and feel that anxiety creep in, I immediately think like, okay, this bus could crash. And if this is my last moment on Earth, do I want to be like swimming and battling this anxiety, or do I want to just be like focused on that palm tree over there or the clouds? Like, so I would use my concentration to like focus on the beauty of the moment despite my discomfort, and like try to turn my energy away from it. That
Zen Master Aimee, everyone. Zen Master.
I try.
That's really great. I mean, talk about a great tool. You know, I think we all kind of struggle with anxiety, whether it be triggered by physical stuff or if it's just living in your head or whatever the anxieties may be. But right, just bringing it back to the present, being like, okay, this is happening, but I'm focusing on you just have to get right back to the breath, right?
Yeah. Well, there was this moment, I had this right when we got there. Danny had dengue fever, which you get from a mosquito that's infected. And it's this horrible sickness that is just the worst. He was just like in agony for like 13 days, horrible headache. He felt like someone was pulling his eyeballs out of his eyes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, really scary. And I was like researching it. Like I just had to watch out. And if he starts bleeding out of his eyes, then I have to rush him to the hospital, you know, or otherwise he could die.
That sounds terrifying.
So I'm like, it was horrible.
So welcome to your
the tropics. Yeah.
Yes. Welcome to your idyllic Mexico beach life. Dengue fever.
That was like the first week we were there. You know, we were looking for a school for Lincoln. We were looking for an apartment all while he had that. So I had gone down to this little restaurant on the corner, and where we were staying was this pretty little church that has like yellow spires, and it was raining. This was like muggy summer. So it was like the evening, and on the air was just yellow. Like the street was yellow. This church was yellow. Like it was just this like golden little moment of sun shining through all this rain and wetness. And I'm waiting for our pizza, and I'm sitting there just looking out at the rain and at the yellow, and it was just so beautiful. I was just hit with this overwhelming sense of wonder and magic. Danny's like upstairs dying of dengue fever, but like in that moment I was like, how amazing that we're here. Like I know that us being here is going to change me forever. Like that was the first moment that I really fell in love with the place. And I just like in the midst of the horrid struggle was this little glimmer of magic that kind of sustained me through the next couple of days as he slowly got better and whatnot. But
it sounds really magical.
Little glimpses like that happen in the midst of the chaos.
So what are your takeaways? You lived there for a year. I'm assuming that, I mean, knowing the experience myself in terms of just talking to you, that some of the sicknesses got better. Mm-hmm. And you ended up moving on with life and living in Mexico. Is this a lifestyle that, I mean, do you see this ending, or do you see yourself basically being a digital nomad for the foreseeable future?
We are still deciding on that as far as like the future goes, at least for the next year. We are in Spain and going to be around Europe doing this. One of the biggest takeaways that from that year in Mexico was I got a whole new appreciation and compassion for immigrant families in the United States. Just having that experience of being the one, like being the family of the school that sends their kid without the right supplies because they just don't have their stuff together. Like, it's so easy to like look at that person when you're in your element and they're not in their element and they don't like have the right stuff going on. They don't have the language or they don't have the supplies, and it's so easy to judge them when you're sitting in your comfort. But when you're that person, it's like, oh wow, like I get it now. It was very humbling to just be in that situation and kind of be at the mercy of people's kindness and understanding, which we were, like I said, not disappointed. Like, people were so nice, so helpful. We had like so many angelic beings show up for us in the form of like helpful strangers.
I love that point, Aimee. I think that's something that we can all take as just humans in terms of offering our empathy to people that we may want to, or we may find ourselves moving into a snap judgment because, like you said, we're not in our element, or they're not in, or we are in our element and they're not in theirs. And it really just reminds me of coming back to that place of where, how do you approach people in all circumstances with compassion? Those people at the grocery store that are maybe behaving differently than you, and maybe, you just don't know anyone's story. I really appreciate you bringing that up. I think that is a very relevant point to be making at this point in time. So
the other thing that goes along with that too is not taking yourself so seriously. Like, we had we found ourselves in so many situations where we were, demonstrating that we are like not knowing what's going on. Lincoln, at his school, we found this amazing school for him. He had a great experience there, but Halloween happened about a month after he started, and they had mentioned something about, oh, like, yeah, kids can dress up in costume if they want. And so I'm thinking, I know Halloween's like not even celebrated in Mexico. So I'm like, oh, kids probably aren't really going to be that dressed up. So Lincoln just went like in his normal school uniform. And he was literally the only kid in the whole entire school without a costume. The only kid on Halloween. And so he showed, and luckily he's an easygoing kid and was like not worried about it. But I was like, oh, my heart just sank when I showed up and saw that. And so his teacher learned quick, like, oh, I have to like explain things more to her so that she has the right stuff. So when we picked Lincoln up that day, she's like, okay, now tomorrow is Day of the Dead. And, kids can dress up like skeletons and paint their faces and stuff. Like, it's this fun thing. And so we took Lincoln home that day, and we're like, okay, I don't care if we have to walk from one side of town to the other. We're finding the makeup. We're going to get him a little skeleton like get up so that he can not be the weird kid tomorrow. So we spend all this time like hunting around for the makeup, and we dress him up all in black little skeleton costume the next day, paint his face. We were super proud of ourselves for like, going for it. He shows up the next day. He's the only kid except for one other kid who's dressed as a skeleton. It was the opposite situation the very next day. So I'm like, oh my gosh, she's trying to sabotage us. There must have been some sort of miscommunication. Like, there was one other kid who had like was still wearing his uniform but had painted half his face like a skeleton in the school.
Oh,
and so,
gosh.
So it's like just situations like that. Yes. I was like, I know it was so sad, but I mean, luckily Lincoln wasn't troubled by it. But I was like, wow, like, you just all you could do was laugh it off, because what else are you going to do about it?
Cultural experiences.
Yeah, I mean, things like that. It was, there's a lot of them.
So tell me, what would you, for people that are looking at your circumstance and being like, it's so cool, you lived in Mexico, now you're in Spain. What advice would you offer to someone who is considering taking the leap?
I would say, don't be afraid to let go of what you know and are comfortable with. Like, everything is on the other side of your comfort zone. Like, and it all moves with you. Like, every time you expand your comfort zone, like your ability to experience becomes that much bigger. And because you're willing to let go, you make space for all this new wonderful experience. Like for me, because I was willing to let go of whatever I'd built for myself in Washington, I was able to learn Spanish with my family. I learned how really to make friends and gained a lot of amazing friendships there. I learned how to teach yoga. I did my yoga teacher training there, which is something that I had always wanted to do. But like, I mean, all these things were kind of these vague goals, like, oh, maybe sometime in the future, that'd be cool if this happened.
And you did it in Spanish, right? Didn't you do it in Spanish?
Yeah. Well, it was like, she could speak English, so the instruction was English and Spanish. But yes, I can teach a class in broken Spanish right now. But yeah, all these things that were these vague goals became these free flowing realities because we had cleared the space for it. And it was just natural. Like they naturally come to you when you have room.
I love that.
Clearing the space is a challenge, but it becomes so worth it because through this stuff, that's where you grow and that's where you learn. That's where you gain. I gained so much more compassion for other people and for myself. That's the only way to learn. Like, I mean, you can either wait for life to throw things at you that are unexpected, or you can try to craft your learning experience along the way, which life always does both. But it was that was how we did it, and I'm very thankful for our experience there.
Very good points, Aimee. I loved that. The one comment I wanted to make, before you moved to Mexico, you had sold your home and moved up to Washington to start a business. So this wasn't the first, foray into making radical life change. I think that was one of the things as an observer, I was so amazed and impressed that you had sold your home here in Modesto, where I am, and moved up to Washington, started a business. It was going great. It wasn't like it wasn't doing well. And then you guys were like, actually, we want to move to Mexico. Actually, we're going to just go live the life that we want to live. And I think that's really inspiring. So I wanted to give context before we wrapped everything up so that our listeners understood that it really feels like, looking at it now, if we're looking at the last 5 years of your life in retrospect, it really does feel like you were kind of led and you followed the call and you listened to your heart and you were presented with these opportunities. And now look at how bold and daring and brave that you are.
Well, yeah, the thing of it is in doing one thing, like taking that first step, every other step becomes more possible, like once we knew we can make a business and we can, like Danny talked a lot about this in our episode. I don't remember what number it is, but I interviewed him about his process in starting the tattoo shop. But yeah, once you do one thing, that you can do whatever you want, so it's like you have a dream and you go, okay, I know the process of what I have to do in order to make this happen. And so it's just a matter of then making it happen. And it seems like an extreme way to like learn things at times. But another thing that I was going to bring up about takeaways was that putting yourself in unfamiliar circumstances, getting yourself out of the box, your lapses in mindfulness that you can get away with within your comfort zone, you can't get away with them, in these other circumstances. So naturally, you're forced to be more aware of everything, of your communication, of your body language, of how you're showing up. And that was something that I really learned living in close contact with the two other humans, my husband and son. We'd previously been, in a house. We each have our space, got the office, he's at work. So we come together in this close quarters, intense environment. Emotions can run high. Like the communication, the thoughtfulness, the mindfulness becomes crucial at that point. Like you can't get away with just like, half-heartedly paying attention. Like, you have to be totally present. And that's like the gift, I think, of putting yourself outside of your comfort zone. It forces you to do that. Otherwise, things become disastrous so quick that it's very quick learning.
Very astute. I like that. Aimee, what are the parting words? Any parting words as we wrap this interview up? It was fun to interview you today.
Thanks, Hilary. No real parting words. I like that you just said astute, though. That's a good word.
Oh, thank you. I've been working on my novels, so I'm like pulling up more vocab than I normally do. So thank you for that.
So exciting. Yeah, no, thanks it was a fun talk, something that I've been wanting to share and been nervous to share. So the whole process of this thing is just pretty wild and interesting. Like, not only living your stuff, but then trying to express it is a whole different game that I'm happy we have this platform to explore ourselves on, and hopefully people are getting something out of it as well.
Right. The idea, hopefully they're seeing elements of themselves in the stories that we have between us and the guests that we have on the show. And with that, I just wanted to thank everyone who has joined us today. We really appreciate your support and listening to the podcast. If you feel so inclined, please share the episode, text it to a friend, email it to a friend, share it on Facebook, Instagram. We appreciate it so much. So,
right. And we would love to hear if anyone has further questions. Like, anytime we do a topic and someone wants to know more or has questions, wants clarity, reach out to us. We have our email, and we have the Instagram and the Facebook. So all that stuff, we would love to interact with our listeners in that way.
And if you have a question, like Aimee said, shoot us an email, Intentionists with an S @gmail.com. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll see you next time.
Before we part, we'd like to say thanks for listening, and we hope you'll connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. We would love to hear from you and appreciate all feedback, shares, and likes.
To learn more and subscribe to our newsletter, visit Intentionists.com. And no matter where you are or what you're creating, we send you love and invite you to breathe and begin.
See you next week.